Pick your class and
earn your battle points.
Because it's time for the Star Wars Battlefront podcast. Welcome to episode 194 of the Star Wars Battlefront podcast. I'm your host, Sage Goodwin, and today I am joined by
Marcus
and Nick from Working Class Nerds.
This episode, we're going to be talking about Battlefront, as well as a background on Star Wars games and how we think EA is handling the license. Let's get started. For people who don't know what your podcast is, could you give a little bit of background of yourselves and your show?
So I'm Nick from Working Class Nerds, one of the hosts. Working Class Nerds is a podcast where the two hosts, Marcus and I, we're just two regular folks who have very, very nerdy hobbies, and we talk all about them. So we primarily talk about video games with a large focus on Star Wars games, and especially Star Wars The Old Republic. But we also talk about lots and lots of other games, including, but not limited to, Rainbow Six Siege, Spider-Man PS4, Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War, the Doom series, Red Dead Redemption 2, and most recently, Call of Duty Modern Warfare. But outside of video games, we've also talked about all of the different Marvel superhero movies, done a little bit of reviewing on those and comparisons, and then also, of course, all of the Star Wars movies that have come out since we started recording. And once in a blue moon, we'll talk about some board games and Dungeons and Dragons.
Nice.
So to talk about sort of Marcus and I, Marcus, who are you for everybody out there?
So I'm the idiot of the show, just for the record. Nick's the smart one. He's going to be the one going to PA school. I'm a husband. I'm a dad. Star Wars is my life. It's been since I was a little kid. I was that kid that always, got off the school bus, got beat up by the neighborhood kids, and then ran to the house and watched the Star Wars movies and read the comic books. And so Star Wars is just a part of my life. We have this wonderful podcast. I stream on Twitch. I'm also in the a BioWare and Star Wars The Old Republic content creator. It's their program. I don't know if Battlefront has this or EA.
For EA, it's Game Changers.
Okay, so it's a division of the Game Changers, I think, but it's its own thing for just BioWare. Anyways, I play all the games that you guys talk about. I played a ton of Battlefront 2015. And then when Battlefront 2 came out, I jumped into that, and that's when I found this show. But what about you, Nick?
So when we first started the show, I was more directly a student. I have since graduated with my bachelor's degree, but now I work in a hospital, in an ER more specifically, and I also am a podcaster, of course. Technically, I'm also in BioWare's Star Wars The Old Republic content creator program, but I think it's more Marcus that actually handles all of our show's contributions to that. In terms of what games I've played all of EA's Star Wars games, and my favorite of them is probably Fallen Order. In our show notes here, we asked for a favorite meme. I've always loved the Kenobi "Hello there" and then General Grievous sort of whipping out all the lightsabers memes or TikTok videos. I find the way people can get creative with those really, really funny.
I was unaware of you guys until you reached out, and then Marcus was telling me that he's been a secret listener of our show.
Yeah, it's like Twitch. I'm the lurker. Mm-hmm. So I have like the key people that I really care about in Twitch, but then I'm the guy that'll while I'm playing a game, I'll just get on somebody's channel and I'll give them an extra view, but I'll just lurk and listen to what they have to say. And out of nowhere, if they do something ridiculous, I'll donate $5 to their channel. And if you do that, because like a sub or like bits or a follow, some streamers don't make a big deal out of it because they have so many. But if you just donate money out of nowhere, even if it's just $5, the faces the streamers make, they're like, oh, who the hell is Marcus B814? But thank you so much. You're not even following me and you're donating to me? What the? And so I'm the ultimate in lurker. But what I like about your show is you guys break down what's the positive and the negative that's coming out of it. And it broke my heart to hear the episode where, Scarif gets released, but yet they're like, oh, yeah, we're going to continue our half-ness in Star Wars games, and we're going to shut down all content updates. And I was just like, that's such... Oh, I should have asked, is swearing allowed on the show?
I will bleep you out.
Okay. So it is
Usually
not.
with the Star Wars sound.
Okay.
Okay, got it.
Got it.
Hopefully I didn't curse either yet. But anywho, to piggyback off of Marcus's earlier point, I do appreciate the breakdown that you have been doing about all of the content as it comes out, and sort of a fun way to look forward to what's going to come out. Did you want to touch upon Star Wars Squadrons at all? I know that's recently been out.
Yeah, definitely.
Or the trailers, I should say.
Yeah, so we've got the previous episode. We had a friend of the podcast, Wolf, on the show. We talked about Squadrons. We talked about the future of Battlefront, future of EA games, the renewal of the license. One thing right before we get into the meat of the show, I would like to update. We are now streaming every Saturday, usually around 1 p.m. MST, which is 3 p.m. Eastern Time, as well as about 8 p.m. BST. That is what we're doing every Saturday around that time. Sometimes it's a little earlier, sometimes a little later, depending on how the streaming software is cooperating. But now let's go into the main topic of the show, EA and the Star Wars license. So EA has had the Star Wars license since 2013. They have it for 10 years. And it is going to expire and probably be renewed in 2023 by the way that EA is talking. They've released Battlefront 2015, Fallen Order, as well as Battlefront 2. Those are the main three that we've gotten under the EA license of Star Wars. And then we'll have Star Wars Squadrons coming out in October. The game, so they also, under this license, they had a very interesting thing. With the Lego games, they aren't under the license, and kind of, but not really. We also have SWTOR.
Yeah, so SWTOR came out in December of 2011, and as far as I understood, that's when the license started, and they extended it to 2023, because I thought it was 2011 to 2021, but maybe I'm wrong. And then, as far as I know, coming from BioWare itself, that the license doesn't affect them, but I don't know how that transfers now that Disney owns the IP, and I'm curious on why EA doesn't invest more into these Star Wars games.
So
specifically,
EA and Disney signed a deal in 2013 for the EA exclusivity rights for Star Wars games.
Oh, so maybe
because that was when Disney got Star Wars in 2012, I think.
So it did. So it was under the EA Star Wars license. SWTOR was under that license, and then when Disney bought it, I think they renewed the 10 years.
The OG LucasArts days, right? Was it one of the games that were still under LucasArts?
I believe so, yes.
That was KOTOR, Knights of the Old Republic. That's not SWTOR. But I'm pretty sure the EA license.
It was anything before EA or before Disney got the license, I think was under LucasArts as like basically, if it wasn't a movie, it was LucasArts, I think.
I believe you're right, because I remember Jackie Cow talking about LucasArts communicating with the developers on like what they can use and what they couldn't use for some art direction stuff.
And technically, LucasArts is still a thing. They're just an internal Lucasfilm thing that handles everything instead of being its own kind of production thing.
All right, I think it's a subdivision of LucasArts that focuses on, or Lucasfilms, I should say, that focuses on video games. Does that sound right?
Roughly? I think so.
No, that's true. They have their own video game division of Lucasfilm, LucasArts.
But it is one of those weird situations with that game. Like it wasn't rebranded. It just kept on going as the game kept on going, even though that EA got the license and EA owned BioWare, which made this game. It's a very strange place.
Yeah, it's sort of a complicated scenario for sure.
For anybody that doesn't know, SWTOR is an MMORPG, and it takes place 3,000 years before the Battle of Yavin. So it's in the Old Republic, lots of Jedi, lots of Sith, and what I don't understand is the whole reason why we're here is to find out if EA is doing doing what they're supposed to be doing. And SWTOR has everything that any player would want. Last week's guest was saying how they're looking for, PvP, which is, whatever, player versus player combat, an open world setting where you can explore worlds, and then almost like a Squadrons in SWTOR, it's called Galactic Starfighter. You can do all of those in SWTOR, but yet a lot of people don't even know about it, and it baffles my mind because Star Wars is the second largest IP in the world, and there's no promotion of this game. Just like I feel like EA isn't promoting Battlefront 2 when it should be promoting it. And, even if they have a sub, I don't want to say DICE, but another company take it over. Because, to be honest, now that they put it on Steam and it was free to play, free to download if you have PlayStation Plus, I mean, more people are playing that than it maybe in the last year right now.
Oh, definitely. They had a huge surge. Just on PlayStation, they had the stats where they were tracking through trophies earned. It was 4 million people just on PlayStation. And I think overall they have like 15 million people playing, 15 million plus people playing across all. These aren't obviously official numbers because they don't give those out, but this is through the different ways of measuring that. About 15 million different people. And that's crazy when you look at that in terms of other games. Like, that is unmatched in a lot of the AAA games. Like, you say you have a player base of maybe 5 million, and that's a big thing with certain online games.
I don't know how many concurrent players are playing SWTOR, but it's nowhere near that. And,
right.
But the thing is why wouldn't they see that? And why not do one more content update? Make it free to play across the board. Make it cross-platform. Look what Call of Duty just did with the cross-platform. Mm-hmm. We can play with the Xbox, PlayStation, or the PC. And if you don't want to play against somebody with a keyboard and mouse, you can just click the button and say, I don't want to play with them. But between me and you, if you're using a controller, you have aim assist. It's actually sometimes easier to use a controller than the keyboard and mouse, unless you're Mr. Precision with the mouse. Mm-hmm. But stopping content on Battlefront 2 right now, I think, was a bad move. And even if they said, look, the free content is over, but we're going to create something that's going to be, an expansion or, downloadable content map pack, I would be willing to spend $10-15 for that because, I am not telling you anything, but Camino is the most beautiful map I've ever played out of any game.
Oh, definitely.
When you're running through those hallways and you're playing it on Ultra on your PC, and the white light is shining everywhere, it's almost blinding. And why they stopped the content, I don't know why. I really don't. And to make Battlefield 5, I'm pretty sure Battlefront 2 right now, a year and a half or 2 years almost out.
Oh, it'll be 3 years this in November.
Okay, so it's a bigger game than Battlefield 1.
Oh, definitely. So they actually there was a report that showed with the same report on the PlayStation Plus numbers through achievements. They measured how many people were through achievements were earning them independently. All of those versus Battlefield 5 versus Battlefront 2, and the results were so crazy in comparison. So you've got the huge numbers of Battlefront, and then you've got this very small numbers of Battlefield. Still a very sizable amount, but drastically smaller than what you would expect. And the reason that they're doing this, one, DICE and Battlefield is DICE's bread and butter. They've been doing this series for a decade or so, maybe even longer.
More than that. Yeah, because what was it, Battlefield 1952 or 2000? Well, I don't know what the first one was.
1943 or something like that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. But it was like a futuristic one way back in PC days.
Yeah, the company was founded in 1992, so they've been making these games for a while. And obviously, it's not just Battlefield, but that was the main thing that they did. Starting off with pinball games, surprisingly.
Wow. So I just feel like, and this may be an EA thing, because you can blame it on DICE or you can blame it on BioWare, but I feel like EA is the big company at the top, and they're really, the big decisions come from them. Mm-hmm. Maybe not.
So,
but
all of the developers on the Battlefront team would love to have continued the game. They would have loved to continue, but were forced to go on to other parts of it. And looking back, we definitely saw that as it was very concerning when you see all of these big players on the team going to other companies or other game titles. We should have known beforehand, but it was such a huge thing because Battlefront was doing so well. It was so successful, so popular. They had done a lot of work into revamping everything, and then here we have the game getting canceled for Battlefield 2021, which is such a sad thing. But obviously, through what we've seen, DICE is definitely a one-game company. They cannot support a game online with a live service as it was seen through Battlefront 2.
What I'm trying to say is this just EA? Is this an EA thing? And just going halfway in all the time. They give us a good product and they're like, okay, we're done. Let's move on. We said we're going to do 2 years of content. See you later. Where you have other games that continue to give content over year after year after year, especially with Star Wars.
Rainbow Six Siege, one of the main tentpole examples. Like, they've done such a great job with that game and the continuation, going in its 5th year of content support, which is one of those things that is rarely seen in first-person shooter games.
Right. And I can speak personally. I've played a whole bunch of Siege. They don't have to do a whole lot. They don't have to add a whole lot to Siege, as their updates. They add a couple of new operators, and they can tweak a map here, or occasionally it's add a map there. But they're not. It's not even like they add all new maps every single content update,
because that would separate the game a lot. Obviously, Rainbow Six Siege is a much, much smaller game, but I think that's what they should do with me sitting in my office here, not working on games, not being a developer, can say this.
Right.
But they should, this is like the most armchair developer thing ever, focus on a smaller game. I would love to see Star Wars games be smaller experiences. Maybe instead of Battlefront 3, where it has everything, we have Star Wars Squadrons that does space combat. If you want to play space combat, you go to that game. We have a Battlefront 3 where it's just infantry. And then we have a hero game where it's just heroes. I mean, obviously, I think with the heroes, that kind of really messes with the Battlefront formula, because from the beginning, actually, there are heroes there, but you couldn't play them with the first game. But you get my point. They're a vital part of Battlefront franchise as we know it now, but it could change.
Right. I think that speaks to that sentiment of do one thing perfectly rather than a lot of things mediocrely.
Definitely.
I think that speaks to a larger sort of maybe even societal trend. Like before the show, we were chatting about our favorite alcoholic beverages and talking about our experiences with different microbrews and things like that. And I think the popularity of those is people can appreciate when a company makes one particular product extraordinarily well, and that's it. And I think in the same vein, if EA wants to focus on making a development team making one game that focuses on one aspect of what they might include in a larger game, and make that just its solo standalone game, make it perfect and make it really robust and have all the features you could possibly want, I think people will gravitate towards that and really appreciate it. So I think a business strategy they might follow, or they might already be following, is rather than have the one game to rule them all, so to speak, or one game that includes all of these game modes like a SWTOR has, they might be moving towards that business model of producing all these separate individual games that have these separate sort of experiences. They have a Squadrons where it's just the Starfighter aspect of it. Or, maybe down the line, you have Fallen Order recently that's sort of a linear first-person sort of campaign, almost like an RPG, but not quite.
Mm-hmm.
Style, and then you have
it told a single story that you went through entirely very, very well, setting the bar for what a Star Wars single-player game could be.
It precisely. I for the record, I absolutely loved Fallen Order.
Same.
I would love to see them do an open world version where something more akin to like a Rockstar type game, but I can get into that later. But yeah, go ahead, Marcus.
All right, so as much as I agree with you, but why not just make one game and build on it? So make the Battlefront 3, and it starts off with the infantry. And then in year 2's focus is Squadrons, and put Squadrons in it. And then year 3, we're implementing more heroes and more game modes and all of these things, or whatever that content cycle is, and keeping one game, and you just build off of it. That's
that could be a good
I'm
option too. Taking in the seasons approach that is super popular in Fortnite and Apex. Just those are two great examples of season-based content where they take away content and introduce new content.
Well, we've been playing Call of Duty, and they have the seasons. And there was one of the seasons things. Once you got to a tier, you got an attack dog. It's a German Shepherd, and I earned it during the season 3, and Nick was like, "Oh, how can you get that?" Well, it's not available anymore. It was a season 3 earning.
Exclusive.
But
yeah,
that's where SWTOR gets it right. It's a free-to-play game, right? So you can just go on your computer, download it, and you can play it. And right out of the gate, you have an unbelievable story for 8 different classes, Jedi and Sith, troopers, or even, operatives, the Imperial agent, whatever it is. And you can go through these base stories for free. There's 8 of them. Hours and hours and hours of content. And then, so once they did that, then they released their next expansion and Endgame and PvP, and they've introduced these things over the years. Now, the content cycle is completely slowed almost to a stale. And this is why, I reached out to you guys about this, because now they're doing the same thing to Battlefront 2, when Battlefront 2 is now thriving. Where right now is when they should be developing a new DLC pack for it and selling it for $15 to extend the life of this game and let EA make more money, or whoever make the money now rather than make some game that, half the people who bought Battlefront 2 are going to buy because it's their baby. There's enough game development companies out there where they could pass it on to the next group.
It's definitely an EA problem, and rumblings that we've heard, sources that I have and people in the Wayfinder team have told us that it was one of those things where they were ready to continue support for years to come, and then from up above they were like, no, we're not doing that, and they couldn't do anything about it. The developers want the game to continue. They want to support it as much as possible, to the point where they were actually they were fixing a problem a week or two after the last update, because they had some really bad bugs. The team on their free time were making bugs in the downtime that they had as they were switching from work to home. That was crazy.
And that's the terrible part about these corporations, who people sit around a board, or like us podcasters who were judging developers, like we know how to make a game, but it's not what I'm saying. These people that are sitting on a board are ruining something that is actually popular because they don't see the investment value on extending the life of a game. Mm-hmm. As an example, SWTOR cost $200 million to make. It's one of the most expensive games ever made, right? Or back in 2011. But EA probably feels as if they did not get their money back, so they just slowed content to a snail's pace. And now, Battlefront 2015 was a great game. They could have just kept building on that. And, everybody, the biggest cry from Battlefront 2015 is there was no single-player story. But in my opinion, I think it was a trial. I think they said, let's put this game out there. Let's see what people think, and let's fix the problems with it for the next one. And I think they did it. I'm going to call it a class story, but it's like the single-player story in Battlefront 2. It was really good.
Yeah.
It wasn't long enough, but it was a really good story. And what was her name? Aiden
Versio.
Versio, yeah.
Well, it was a safe story. It was the one we needed for the time.
Right, and we always wondered what happened to all those Imperial troops when the Death Star exploded, and we got that answer. And then, I read the Inferno Squad book.
Yes.
Which was her story. That was awesome. And I was like, oh my God, I just played it. Yeah, I just played it. And again, now 2 years or 3 years later, now there's going to be nothing else. And Squadrons is coming out, and as cool as that is, I'm not going to play it. And that's just a me opinion because flight sim is not for me. Mm-hmm. Which is okay. I mean, the graphics look unbelievable, and I'll probably watch the YouTube videos of the cutscenes to see, to get the story content out of it. But to me, Squadrons is an expansion for Battlefront 2 that they could have released, especially with the $40 price tag. Because you're going to download the game anyways, and the development time has to be more. Development time has to cost more when it's a new game versus if you're extending the life of a game. Because you're already using the base engine for X. And I'm pretty sure, are they using Unreal Engine for Squadrons? Or are they
We aren't sure. I'm pretty sure that they're using Frostbite because they started, it would have been 2 years ago that they started this game to have it come out about now, that it would probably be Frostbite because they don't have the gravitas or the experience of using Unreal. Like, Respawn uses Unreal. It's their bread and butter. They make all of their games in Unreal. You know it very well. They can do, and the developers said it themselves. If they tried to do this in Frostbite, it wouldn't have been made. So, but Motive is a new studio created in 2015 or 2016, I think. 2015, yeah.
But my point is, why not just extend? And that's where EA, I think, fails. They're not seeing the bigger thing because now, once people find out that the game is dead or there's no more content, it's just a matter of time before people stop playing it because I know that when I got into Battlefront 2, I was like, oh my God, I was playing it every night. I'm like, this is amazing. And then hearing that there's no more content, you're like, oh, okay, how long am I going to play the same? How long am I going to play the same thing over and over and over again until I'm just like, okay, there's nothing else coming.
And that's what we're trying to accomplish with what we're doing with the Wayfinder team is to build out these things where we keep the community alive, keep it fresh, and try these new things. And we've got some stuff in the works that we aren't announcing quite yet because we're still in the process of building it up. But we do have some fun stuff going on in the future. But yeah, a lot of people are getting into the game for the first time. They're experiencing the amazingness of the game. But aren't getting any new content. So they're definitely going to be a bit of the community that won't be playing it after so long.
Right, because they're going to be going to the new greatest thing, and I promise it's not going to be the new Battlefield. I want to know, of all the Battlefront players out there, and this is the show to do that, how many of you guys are going to go play Squadrons?
A lot of the people in our community, at least for that listen to the Battlefront podcast, will be. Again, it is a smaller subset, and I'm really happy for the people that did enjoy Starfighter Assault. A friend of the podcast, Rogue Wolf, being one of the big proponents of the Starfighter stuff. This is his dream game. But yeah.
Well, a friend of our show, Kogus, same thing. He played on May the 4th. He did a stream on. He played the original TIE Fighter game.
Oh,
and streamed it. It was awesome. I was at work and I just had my phone propped up and I was just listening to it, and it was 4 hours of the TIE Fighter sound, and it was just it was awesome. And he this is his game. Like you said, what did you say? Rogue Wolf?
Yes,
Rogue Wolf. This is his game. But out of the core Battlefront players, are they all going to switch to Squadrons? Okay, they're going to play the story, and then they're going to be back to Battlefront?
More than likely. But there's that always that I definitely see it's going to have a very strong community, and I really hope there's rumblings about it being a very esports focused game. So hopefully we get some cool stuff out of that too.
That would make for a lot of interesting, like, streamed content if it ends up being an esports game. I would love to watch people play that game, but for me, I know Marcus definitely gets motion sickness when trying to play to play any of those flight simulator type games or game modes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I do a little bit, not quite as bad as him. He and I are cousins, so we share some genes in that respect, unfortunately. But
it's because we're Greek.
Right. I guess Greece must have a terrible air force because we're all motion sick. I'm only kidding. But that I would definitely watch someone else play that. But if I try to do it myself, I get all screwed up for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that could be an interesting way to sort of extend the life of the game and or make more money off of it, even if your core player base, although their core player base I'm sure is going to be super devoted, if that number of players isn't quite as large as like a regular Battlefront title. I think if you can make get lots of folks streaming it or have esports surrounded by it, I think that's a way to sort of broaden your audience that are consuming content from that game.
Definitely.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. I would like to know the analytics of people who play flight sims or even, a game like that versus a first-person shooter.
Oh, the first-person shooter is I think the biggest type of game that there is. And that's obviously because you had one success and then everyone's making those because they're successful games, and then it doesn't really lead anything for other games to do. But first-person shooters, third-person shooters are the biggest because it's super easy. It's like the most human thing is, it's super easy to explain. You point gun, pull trigger, and something happens.
Right.
Yes.
And Fallen Order was a fantastic game. And I'm not even done with it. That's a long story. Because my mentality is if I'm not playing, if I'm playing another game, I'm missing out in SWTOR. And that's the MMO hook, right? Once you start playing, you're hooked. And why would I play another game? And I felt like that's for so long. Why would I play Battlefront 2 or Fallen Order when I could be playing SWTOR and doing the chores that I need to do in that game to continue to get gear or whatever. So
on that front, final topic before we end the show, I'm not an MMO person. I tried them. It's not for me. But explain to me, so someone who doesn't play MMOs, someone who doesn't really have a drive to play more MMOs, what is the draw of SWTOR?
For me, the draw for SWTOR is one of the big things for me in any games. I'm going to make my answer quick, but one of the big things for me in any video game or media content is I really enjoy things with a really large like universe or backstory of lore. So some things that are my favorites are obviously Star Wars, but Lord of the Rings as well because of the large universe behind it. The Fallout series of video games because of the large universe behind them, and the Elder Scrolls series, same reason. So when I found out that there was a Star Wars game that I could get into that essentially doubled the amount of lore and universe that I could get into beyond the Star Wars that I already knew and loved, I jumped all over it. So I played through my whole class story rather quickly. But I know Marcus obviously has that aspect as well, and then also has a very large community aspect that he gets into as well. So what's the big hook for you, Marcus?
So SWTOR, as I said earlier, it's free to start. So anybody can download it. And would you like to start off and be a Jedi apprentice? Want to be just a Jedi? You can be. You want to be a Sage Jedi, which is like a healer, or essentially you don't use your lightsaber, you're throwing rocks at people. This is on the Republic side. Or do you want to be a trooper? Or do you want to be Han Solo? Who doesn't want to be a scoundrel and be Han Solo? So you have those 4 class stories, and each one has to be at least 50 hours of story content. Everything is voiced. If you've ever played the old Knights of the Old Republic series from BioWare. It's
Mhm.
all you have conversation choices, and there's light side and dark side choices. So if Nick is the character that I'm talking to, and he's being a smart guy to me,
Smart
so
Alec.
yeah, smart Alec. Thanks, Nick. You saved me there. And if you, one choice is the light side, like, okay, man, why don't you just go away? I don't really want to deal with you. The gray answer is, listen, man, I don't want to get upset, so just go away. And then the third option is shoot lightning at it.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's that element, and then at the same time you have you go through this entire class story, which is basically your open world RPG where you fly from planet to planet to planet, and you can roam. There's datacrons all over the planets that you literally are some of the hardest things I've ever had to get. And each one has its own like lore story behind it. So there's so much lore in the game. Then on top of it, you have PvP, which most games have PvP. Now it's not like a first-person shooter, but there's PvP. You have your end game rating, which is, just like in most MMOs, or like the Division 2 has raids, Destiny 2, stuff like that. And then
If you're entirely unfamiliar with an MMO, a raid is a group of either 8 or 16 people where it's basically a group quest. So you have to fight usually a series of sub-bosses and solve some puzzles along the way, and then you fight a big, large involved like boss encounter at the end of a raid. And it's the whole purpose is that you have to work together with your group and communicate well to accomplish this overly difficult task.
it's like in Supremacy when you go through and you win and you're like, oh, the match is over. Nope, you got to go take over the capital ship at the top. And then if you lose, you get sent back down to the planet like you've been shunned. And why this is where, and to top it off, they have Galactic Starfighter, which is exactly a Starfighter campaign. It's only PvP, but you can get in your starship. You can customize everything in the entire game, your starship, your outfits, everything, and you can make your own Star Wars story where almost like the three pieces of Fallen Order, Battlefront, and Starfighter is all in one game with hours and hours of story content.
Okay.
And who doesn't want to create their own Twi'lek or Sabrak or human, or you want to make a cyborg, and it really, or what's the newest class? What's Kit Fisto?
Nautilin?
Nautilin. You can be a Nautilin. It's just, I think for me with SWTOR, it's the lore and how you can build. You go into the larger world, and it actually feels like it's a giant larger world.
Okay.
I think I know that's kind of a lot, but the game offers a lot.
Yeah, definitely. The thing that always got me is the awesome CGI trailers that they made, and then the actual game itself, and how much of a disconnect there is between those two.
That is true, but I think that's an MMO thing. I don't think that's exclusively.
Yeah,
a
it definitely is an MMO thing, because World of Warcraft does the same thing.
Diablo does the same thing.
Yes.
The Diablo cinematic trailers are like,
Even Elder
like
Scrolls.
Mhm.
Same thing. Yeah.
Elder Scrolls Online, that's probably the prettiest of all MMOs, but I think when making an MMO versus, the Battlefront game, you have to take assets. You can't invest all of that time into the setting because the worlds are so large. I mean, I think you can visit 30 plus planets. I mean, who doesn't want to jump in the Sarlacc pit? Right? And be digested for 1,000 years, and Alderaan will still be there when you fly out of it.
Rip Alderaan.
Yeah.
Who are you referring to there? Boba Fett?
Yeah. So the funny part about Alderaan is in SWTOR they just released the Alderaan Stronghold, and you can decorate your own Alderaan house and compound. And I won't buy it because it's a bad investment, because in 3,000 years it's not going to be there. So in my opinion, it's
Terrible long-term investment.
Yeah, terrible long-term investment. But my final point on SWTOR. SWTOR is doing the same thing, but this is almost 10 years later that EA is doing to Battlefront 2 is if they would just invest a little bit more money into it, it would be huge. Because most people like Nick, I'll give Nick an example. It took me 2 years to get Nick to play SWTOR. And then once he played his story, he was glued to it. Now, he didn't stick around because there was other games, which is okay. But he played one of the 8 class stories, and he was like, that was fantastic.
It really was. Absolutely.
I'm gonna give it another shot. I will download it. And
you should. And if you, I'll message you. You should go on the Starforge server when you do it, and that's the East Coast Essential server. I'll get you in the guild, and it's just XP bonuses and stuff, and we all can help you if you have questions.
I think that's about wraps it up for this episode. Was there any final notes you wanted to have on the topic of today's episode? SWTOR, EA games, Battlefront, Squadrons?
Yeah. EA, step it up. Invest more into the games that people love because you won't regret it. I don't know if you're listening to, but that's pretty much the moral of this story is stop going halfway, go all the way.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, but I did have one question for you. Do you think that, with the upcoming EA games in this license, do you think it's taken them all of this time to develop and figure out the Star Wars IP so that now we're at the tail end of their 10 years, but it's taken them this long to figure out how to make the games? So now they're going to be able to crank these things out?
Hopefully.
Because
we were talking about this on, what is it, episode 192, I think, where we had Split Screen, Rogue Wolf, Danger Cat, and Arcross on the show. We're kind of talking about this. I think EA should still keep the license. Either they keep it or they open it up to where EA can still make games and then other companies can apply it to make games as well. Those are the two options I think they should do. They should not just give it to another company, because then 10 years later, and when they give it to Ubisoft, and we'll be in the same situation, because they'll have to go from the ground up and do everything that EA already did. Lucasfilm is an incredibly difficult company to make content for. They are super picky. They flip-flop back and forth between decisions. You can see this with the movies, with the choice into directors. They're very difficult to work with, especially with the storyboards team, because it's such a huge franchise that you have to be extremely picky. And EA has worked with that team and has developed a relationship with them that I think would take too long for another company to do. So I think they should either renew the license or they should open it up completely. But I do think a large portion of what EA has been doing is learning what's been going on. They've seen huge success with all of the Star Wars games that they've released, especially the mobile game, which is a prime example of pay to win and loot boxes, but brings in lots of money.
Yeah, I think that's all mobile games.
True. And they're playing in that sandbox there, so they have to play by those rules to make money, and it makes massive amounts of money. It's a huge thing for EA. But they've seen huge success with all of the games that they've made. That I don't understand why the only reason that there aren't more Star Wars games is probably the reason that they've tried. As you see, they've canceled more games that they've released. Which is a common thing in game development, but to the point where it's Star Wars games, we would have had up to 6 or 7 if the games didn't get canceled, kind of thing. So I think a lot of it is definitely developing those relationships with EA with Lucasfilm, and vice versa, that is causing a lot of problems. And they're just now getting to the point where they're seeing payoffs from their work, and we get the statement that EA is, quote unquote, doubling down on Star Wars, which is kind of a weird thing to say 3 years before your license expires.
Well,
right.
If I can give you my tinfoil hat, my conspiracy theory.
Put it on. Let's go.
All right. there is another Battlefront game coming out, and it's going to be an MMO Destiny or Division style where you're going to get to be, it's going to be like SWTOR and Battlefront kind of smashed together. And it's going to be like what Nick was saying earlier about that open world, because if you date back a couple of years, they shut down that open world game that who's the people that made Dead Space? Oh, I can't remember.
Is it Visceral?
Oh.
Yeah, Visceral game. So they shut down that, and that was an open world game
and then it got canceled twice because it was an open world. It was the story based game that was 1313.
Yeah,
right?
That's it.
So that wasn't Visceral. That was a different company. That was before the license got to EA. That was super far into production. Also, I don't know if you saw this report, but Jason Schreier from Kotaku, I don't know if, I think he's on Bloomberg now or something. I don't know if he's still at Kotaku, but Jason Schreier reported that there was a canceled spin-off Battlefront game, and it was supposed to be in the same style of Destiny in a bit. It would have a central hub world, which was going to be Takodana, and from there you would go do different missions. But it got canceled.
Well, that sounds awesome.
But 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, there was an ad for a open world not publisher. Who's the head? What's the head of a studio?
Director?
I don't know. Keith Koenig for SWTOR.
Game director.
Game director.
Yeah.
So they were looking for that, and then, that's my tinfoil hat. I think that game is coming, and that's why they're saying they're doubling down, because this is going to be the new SWTOR of the 2020s to take us to the next 10 years, in my opinion. Because that's the one thing that we're missing.
Let's hope you're right, and a big open world type game comes out. Yeah, I'm very interested to see what this quote ends up bringing out of the woodworks. Hopefully it's something that the community and the fans want. That's it for this episode of the Star Wars Battlefront podcast. Thank you so much for listening. You can find us on Twitter at SWB Podcast, as well as on Instagram under at SWB Podcast. Those are the places to go to keep up to date on everything SWBP. You can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/Battlefront Podcast, or through PayPal, paypal.me/TieDyeSheep, TYEDYESHEEP. A great free way to support the show is sharing it with your friends and family, as well as leaving us a review on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you can leave reviews. Our YouTube channel is youtube.com/The Star Wars Battlefront Podcast. We're streaming every Saturday at 1 p.m. or so MST, 8 p.m. BST. Definitely come say hi. We would greatly appreciate it. It's such a fun time playing Battlefront, playing old Star Wars games. We'll do it all on the Battlefront Podcast YouTube channel. Links to the guests in this episode will be in the description. Thank you so much for listening. You can find the show on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. Wherever you can find podcasts, you can find the show. Thank you so much for listening. And as always, may the Force be with you.